This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are here in the studio here in Northern Colorado. We are still doing our COVID isolation here and spending some more time in the studio producing now more video content than we have in the past. So today's a little bit of a different show. It's going to be a solo show, meaning you just get me. There's no guest on today's show. And what I thought I would talk about today is actually, rather than, talking about things that I've talked about in the past, like leadership and how to do better brainstorming, what I want to talk to is current affairs. Some of the things that are going on and things that people have asked me my opinions on or what I thought about it. And also some things that I've seen recently that I am really, really excited about. And one thing that, I don't know about you, but one that I was, pretty excited about was the recent launch of the Dragon demo from SpaceX. Now, I don't know about you, but I was glued to the NASA stream while this was going on. It was, quite impressive. Being able to go and be literally in the rocket with such great video and such great kinds of information. I sat through the first attempt, which they halted because of weather, and then they had the actual launch a couple days later. And sitting there watching a manned-spaced flight taking off and going to the International Space Station. I am a space nut. I love the rockets, and it started off when I was a kid, and I just could not get away from it. As a child, I watched Apollo's launch. I a little bit of memory about Gemini, but that was kind of I was really small at that time. But Apollo, big fan. I remember huddled in front of the TV watching Neil Armstrong take the first step on the moon, watching with great anticipation Apollo 13 and saving the astronauts who were stranded, and then also the space shuttle, and seeing that program come to light and then living long enough to see it retire. Now, I'm a big believer in space, not just because it's interesting or you can go explore, but if you look at the history of the U.S. space program, it turns out to be an excellent catalyst for innovation. Now, I think there is a role for government, all governments around the world, to encourage innovation. And when you think about all of the technologies that came off of, let's say, the Apollo program. So today, if you go in to your doctor and they put the little clip on your finger to check your blood oxygenation level, that was an invention on the Apollo program. They put those sensors onto the astronauts so they could remote monitor, and then it was developed for the healthcare industry, specifically for premature babies, neonates. And then it became, now you can go to any drugstore and buy one and have it at your house and stick it on and know what your blood oxygenation level is. That's just one of literally hundreds of thousands of technologies that came out of the U.S. space program. So what is that role as far as being a catalyst for innovation? Now, in that model, it was very expensive, 100% funded by government. And back right after the shuttles were being retired or getting ready to be retired, and International Space Station was being built, the U.S. space program started by actually a friend of mine, Gretchen McLean. Gretchen has actually been on the Killer Innovation show, so you can go back and listen to her interview. She used to be the deputy director for NASA, and it was Gretchen who started this public-private partnership where the U.S. government actually paid others to build capabilities. They defined the problem, and in this case, they actually funded the Russians to build the U.S. module for International Space Station. So yes, the U.S. module that is part of ISS actually was built by the Russians. And it was kind of an experiment to see, could the Americans and the Russians work together? The Russian space program desperately needed some funding. And so the U.S., and I give Gretchen all world of credit for this, of having such long foresight and saying, look, yes, there may be other issues we're having, because of diplomacy issues, but for science and technology, we can co-innovate in order to do what's best for mankind on Earth, and that is to explore space. And so the U.S. funded it, the Russians built it, and it got launched. And I had the distinct privilege to be Gretchen's guest at NASA to be able to see the launch of the U.S. module going up to become part of International Space Station. And that started what we're seeing today, where the government recognizes that, hey, maybe we're not the best to build it. If we can be effective in defining the problem or the opportunity that we want to go investigate or the problem we want to go solve, spend the time defining the problem, and then let your best and brightest go off and solve it and make that a reality. And so, in this case, under the new model, which we saw with the SpaceX launch, was the government defines the problem. We need a rocket. It needs to be able to carry this much weight. It needs to be able to carry this big of a crew. It needs to be able to travel this distance. It needs to have this kind of redundancy, that we want to have to make sure. And you, outside firms, you figure out how to solve the problem as I've defined it. And those that define it and come up with a solution, then we will fund it. We will be a customer. We will buy those capabilities from commercial products. And that's what's really happened. Now, in the past on this show, we have talked about how to do better problem definition. The key is defining the problem in such a way that people feel they can answer it. And that is a crucial step. And the government has figured out how to define the problem. And commercial businesses like SpaceX have figured out a way to solve that problem. So it's a win-win. And it's that funding, the fact that if I can solve the problem and know that I have an inherent customer who is going to take advantage of that and really take advantage of it, from the standpoint of being able to solve this problem, that is where the real win comes in. That is where the real opportunities become a reality. And so this model of where a business defines the problem and opens it up to others. Now, we may say that that's an open innovation model. My little criticism on the open innovation model is they don't spend enough time defining the problem, or they define it so narrowly, versus stepping back and defining the problem, defining the scope. You want to bring focus to the innovation effort, but defining the problem correctly is a lot harder than you think. It's the old Albert Einstein quote. Albert Einstein was asked one time, if you were given 1 hour to save the world, what would you do? And what was Einstein's answer? His answer was, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem. Then I would spend 5 minutes solving it. We tend to want to jump to the answer. We tend to want to jump to the solution versus defining the problem. The government, the SpaceX program with the other for-profit space programs have figured out a way to define the problem and for commercial businesses to solve it. Now, the Elon Musk, you have to give Elon a lot of credit for what happened with SpaceX. The guy is brilliant. He's amazing. I can tell you after each of my one-on-one meetings with Elon, I have to take a nap. The guy is so high energy. His ability to multitask and keep everything going and moving at such an unbelievable pace is impressive. It's superhuman. Now, I would put he and Dean Kamen, who's also been on the show, as our generation's version of Edison and Nikola Tesla. And that is why the SpaceX launch was so impressive for me. We'll be right back. Over the weekend, the Chicago Tribune published an article by Chris Jones. It was forwarded to me by an old friend who had seen me present my megatrends research over the years. And if you're interested, you can go over to philmckinney.com and look up megatrends, and you'll get backgrounds. And I think there's actually some old slide decks that are up there. And this particular article was looking at the impact to cities from COVID-19. Now, the key quote out of this article, again by Chris Jones, was a sudden potential precipitous decline in the number of people coming to work in cities every day, a phenomenon of the digital revolution, but accelerated at warp speed by the pandemic. The article really is structured around the concept of, will the cities recover? Now, the question my friend asked was, what were my thoughts about the future of cities in the context of my megatrend research? And my megatrend research always focuses on 10, 15, 20 years out. And it's a constant evolving scope of research. And so therefore, it's constantly being tweaked and changed based on things that happen. Now, did I predict a pandemic? No, nobody does that. Would I say that my 10 to 20 year megatrends is absolutely accurate? No way. Anybody that says they can predict 10, 15, 20 years out is blowing smoke. It's not about accurate prediction. It's about laying out the range of possible futures so that you can react, so that you can be able to adjust. Just by going through the mental exercise of looking at these long range megatrends, you are better prepared to be able to react. Now, you have to understand, a couple of, key things from my background. One is if you're watching the video, you see that I'm wearing my White Sox hat. I grew up in Chicago. This friend of mine who sent me the article knew that and sent me the article with regards to the city of Chicago specifically. Now, I grew up in the city, 185th South and Halstead, far south side. It's Cook County. You really call it the suburbs, but these are the suburbs that literally, touched right up to, to the boundary lines of the city of Chicago. Now, in the case of, what's going on and what happened with COVID, look, everybody had the lockdown, everybody had to work from home, schools were out, kids had to go, be learned at home. And that kind of awareness, I think companies and individuals thought about, maybe I can work from home a half a day on Friday or something. But now, all of a sudden, you're finding yourself 4, 6, 8 weeks, some longer, working from home. Well, the technology's gotten really good. Broadband is broadly available. What is it? 80% of all U.S. homes have access to 1 gig service in the United States, and that's, a very high percentage, and many other countries are in the same category. So being able to have access to broadband services and to having the tools, tools such as Zoom. Now, look, we've been using Zoom here as part of the radio show for more than 5 years. Zoom has been a longtime sponsor. We greatly appreciate their support. Eric Ewing, who's the founder and CEO of Zoom, is a near and dear friend. He and I knew each other, when I was at HP and he was at Cisco. And Zoom has turned out to be the big tool that a lot of people are using to collaborate and for students to be able to, work from home. So COVID has forced us to do this grand social experiment. Can you work from home? Can you be effective? Can you learn from home? And what impact does that have on the offices of the future? Now look, cities were already in trouble, my opinion. Downtowns at night or on weekends, it's like a ghost town. I grew up in Chicago, lived in San Francisco, spent 13 years in Washington, D.C. You go into the cities at night or on the weekends, nobody's there. They come down, they work, they leave and go home. The other is the cost of housing in cities is typically quite high. Look at San Francisco as an example. Now, do I think cities will go back to the way they were before? Somewhat. I don't think offices in general will go back to normal. For instance, what is the role of the office? Is it to get people together? I get the communications piece, and believe me, I'm a big believer of that. I believe in, the serendipitous piece. But is that role as needed as much? Does everybody have to be in the office, every day, 9 to 5? What is this new role? Can you communicate and can you collaborate and can you be effective? I think people are finding, business leaders, corporations, teams, individuals are finding that, you have to learn a new way, but the tools are actually really, really good. And so the question is what does the office look like in the future? And when think about the reopening of businesses, even with COVID not completely allowing everybody to go back to normal, many businesses have to reorganize their floor space. You can't have as many people. Some are saying half, some are saying only a third. So if you built a business or an office space to support 100 people, you can only support maybe 35 to 50 people in that same space. What does that mean? Do you buy more space? Do you not have offices? I've talked to many CEOs who actually have looked at their leases to get rid of their lease space because they're not going to bring anybody back. But is the future, what is that future model? What does that look like? Well, I think this is my prediction. I think what we're going to find is that it's not about, work from home. The future model is not work from home. The future model is work from anywhere. I can be just as effective going into the office one day a week as I can doing it from my RV on the road, to being able to do it, from my studio here in northern Colorado. Now, I've been doing an experiment for the last 2 years. I've been on the road, and I found I can do my radio show. It's not easy. It's not perfect. Wireless broadband is critical. It's gotten much, much better. But yes, I have proven over the last 2 years that I can be just as effective. I've done the show from Florida, Kentucky, and Las Vegas, Washington, D.C., all over. And so from that standpoint, you can be effective. This new change is a new leveler. Rural areas now can compete for people to come back and live rural and work and be just as effective. The draw or a need to be in the city, I don't think is going to be there. Some may require it, but I don't think it's going to become as critically important. And we'll be right back. Last week, I took a meeting request from a key government agency here in the United States. They heard about the work that I've been doing over at the Marines, the VA hospitals, and in the past, some of the work that I did with the U.S. Department of Education. They were interested in taking what we were doing in other agencies and possibly applying it to them. Now, I spent a lot of time walking them through what we had done in the past. And so an example is the work that we did at the U.S. Department of Education on innovating education. And as we went through and we kind of gave them the basics of how we facilitated the one-day ideation workshop that we do, we call it disruptive ideation. And the purpose of that work is really not just to go in and facilitate, but to also use it as a mechanism to teach them the skills so that they can go do it on their own. You know, look, I'm a CEO, I'm full-time employed already. This is a little bit of my my pro bono work back to helping make our country better. And I've done this not only in the United States, I've done it for other countries such as Malaysia. I've done it in the UK. I've done it in Germany. I've done it in other places around the world. So it's not, I'm not myopic and only doing it, to help United States. I'm willing to share my expertise. As you're listening to the show. You know that now where I'm in my 16th year of doing this show. We're the longest continuously produced podcast in history now. And we give it away for free. You get to have it. Through gracious support like from Zoom that pays just to cover our costs for having a couple of team members be able to help me do audio because I just don't have time to do all the audio editing or the video editing or maintaining the website for the show. So Zoom covers that cost for us so that we can continue to produce this content. So we give this away for free. So for the government, the U.S. Department of Education, and Marine Corps, VA hospitals, in many cases, it's going in and really coaching, giving them advice based on my experience of having, run innovation within small companies, startups, all the way up to, at HP, we were the largest technology company in the world at 240,000 employees and 120 billion in revenue. So as I'm doing this session, and we were doing it via Zoom Gov, which is a special government version of Zoom that the U.S. government uses. It's highly secure and all of that. We were doing a great session, giving them the background, and then we got to a key question. And that key question, I'm going to read it here for you. Can this be done virtually? Is it as effective as in person? Meaning, could you do a virtual workshop? Could you facilitate brainstorming and ideation virtually? And is it as effective? That was the question. And it was the question that came near the end because they need help. They want to have some ideation brainstorming sessions done because they've got some clear opportunities and some clear problems that they want to get their best and brightest together on and answer. And my answer was a pretty quick answer. And my answer is yes. Yes, it's just, you can do this just as good virtually. Now look, this image that I'm showing you, which is the snapshot of the brainstorming effort for the U.S. Department of Education. It was a live series of workshops. Those are the actual posted notes. Those are the actual groupings. And we'll post an image and post you go over to YouTube and watch this whole show on video so you can see it. This was done as a physical workshop. Now, I've also been on my YouTube channel, so you can go to Phil McKinney over on YouTube. Been doing demonstrations of virtual brainstorming using tools like Jamboard, which allow you to have multiple people from all over the world simultaneously post up their ideas, just like we did here at the U.S. Department of Education. So you can recreate the experience that we had with people coming up and writing ideas and posting it on flip chart paper. We can do the exact same thing with tools like Jamboard. And in fact, one of the things that I have found doing this, now I've done the demonstrations, I've also facilitated some brainstorming sessions while everybody's been in the COVID lockdowns, and I've been doing my own brainstorming using all of these tools. And what I have found, particularly with teams, that actually is better virtually, is being able to be more inclusive, being able to get people from a wider background, more diverse people into the team. Rather than your team just being the people that you work with, it's very easy using tools like Zoom and Jamboard to invite people from anywhere in the world. You don't have to think about, well, it's going to cost us $3,000 to fly them, put them up in a hotel. Is it really worth it for a 3-hour brainstorming session? Nah, we've got it. We've got 8 people who just happen to be in the building. And you tend to do your brainstorming in the past. You always wanted to have people in the room together. Well, that requirement is a constraint. That's a constraint on who gets included. And you may only have people who were born in the country that you're doing the brainstorming in, or only speak their first language is the language of the country that you are working in, or, some other, unintended consequences of how you structure the teams for the brainstorming. Going virtual allows you to make that much, much more diverse and to include people that maybe in the past you would have said, maybe not, they don't live locally, it's going to be too expensive, we got to plan far enough in advance to get them tickets or get them a visa to get into the country, all of those types of things. One of the other benefits that I've found that actually improves doing these sessions virtually is the fact that it requires less time. Even if you're not having to travel internationally, if you're just, we're headquartered here in Northern Colorado. If we wanted to bring somebody from our Sunnyvale office here, then you got to plan for it. They're going to be away from their families. Today, no longer that requirement. Hey, let's get together at 11 o'clock. Boom. Everybody's on Zoom, and off we go. We can be much more ad hoc. We can simply fire up Zoom, fire up a Jamboard session, start whipping out ideas, start sketching on it, by hand. So there are great tools that really do allow you to be pretty effective. So, you can be much more effective on the time. And by the fact that you're more efficient virtually, more people are willing to say yes. If you go around to your team and say, hey, can I get a couple of hours of your time to brainstorm with me? In the past, people are like, oh man, I got to block time. I've got to figure out how to, to potentially travel, or we got to wait, we got to coordinate calendars because some people are not in the office on Thursday. They're going to be traveling, so it's 3 weeks out. The fact that everybody's available, it's just that you got to find the time slot, which is better than requiring everybody to be in the room. That efficiency makes people more willing to volunteer. People in the past who would say, nope, not going to participate. It's just too much of a hassle. Don't have the time, whatever. Now, what is key to facilitating a great brainstorming session? You need well thought out problem statements. Talked about that earlier in this show. Problem statements. Einstein he would spend 55 minutes defining the problem, then 5 minutes solving it. How much time do you spend really, really digging in and understanding the problem statement? Problem statement, key. Second is a well-structured ranking approach. And that is really about how do you score all the ideas, the 200 ideas, how do you get it down to being the top 2 or 3 ideas? Now, you can go back, killerinnovations.com, search for ranking, and you're going to get a ton of previous shows all on how to rank and prioritize the ideas that you need to be spending your time on. That, and you need tools. You need tools like using Zoom, Jamboard from Google, using some questions, and in fact, here's the killer question card deck I'm showing, the Whack Pack. There's a bunch of other tools. Figure them out, use them, experiment, but virtual works, and it works really good. question that I got recently via email from a listener of the show was around the question, is there a good time to start a business or to invent a new product or a service? It's obviously tied to the question around COVID, right? We're all kind of hunkered down in our houses. We're all finding out what our new normal is. The question really was more about, is this a good time to start a new business or to start creating a new product? Now, I've heard all excuses. And in fact, this is a conversation I've had over at the Innovators community from people who've joined over there around looking for advice. And when someone pitches a really great idea, and I'm like, so why haven't you done anything with it? You get all kinds of excuses. Oh, the one I love, which I'm really offended by, is I'm too old. If you're too old, then I'm way too old, right? I'm going to be 60 here coming up soon, right? And look, I'm the believer that today's 60 is the old 40, right? But people think that that innovation is for the young, and that's bogus. Look, Vera Wang, if you're familiar with fashion, Vera Wang, she didn't even start doing her fashion work until she was past 40. I met her. We actually did a custom, what we called a digital clutch. It was kind of a little mini laptop, but the outside graphics and all that was designed by Vera Wang specifically to match her dress series that year. So we're doing digital fashion. Huge success. Huge success. But she didn't start innovating until she was 40. The success that she's had and continues to have is just unparalleled. Look at Colonel Sanders. Colonel Sanders didn't start making chicken until he was in his 50s and didn't really get to do franchising and that until he was well into his 60s, right? So he started incredibly late and had a huge number of failures before he solved the problem of fast food production, of delivering a high-quality product very quickly for roadside quick-serve restaurants. So you can thank fast foods to Colonel Sanders. What about Henry Ford? Henry Ford didn't start Ford Motor Company until he was, I think it was 41 when he did it. I'm not quite sure on that date, but you can double-check me on that, right? But he wasn't the 20-year-old college kid, with a great idea. Age is not a constraining factor. Don't talk yourself into that. The other is rule. Just don't start a company during a recession. Look, I think it was over this last weekend, the U.S. government announced that the U.S. economy is in a recession as a result of COVID, right? So there's always, some people say, "Whoa, you don't start a new business. Don't launch a new product, new service, whatever, in a recession." Wrong. Two companies that I'm fairly close with that both started in the recession or depression is Disney and Hewlett-Packard. Both started in a recession. Actually, they both started in the depression, right? So if there's anybody telling you that's a rule or you got a rule running in your head, it's bogus, right? Some may think that you got to have some kind of a special degree. No. Go listen to my imposter syndrome video over at TEDx if you want to hear my story and my perspective on that. Some think you got to have the golden Rolodex. You got to have all the contacts. You got to have the network. You got to know everybody. No. You can ask people for introductions who do have the golden Rolodex. Look, I get a lot of LinkedIn requests. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free. Just tell me how you heard about it. Tell them that you watched this video or you're a regular listener to the radio show, you're a follower on the podcast, you're a subscriber, and I'll accept your connection request, okay? Don't have any money. Oh, well, friends and family, get scrappy, figure out a way to build an early version of it with little to no money. Barter with others who have what you need. Barter your time. Contribute your time to somebody that then will build you a 3D model to their project, right? So contribute. If you're a marketing person, help them market what they're thinking about and get them to design, be a designer, design your product. Barter for your services that you need. The other is you just don't know where to start. You don't know how to start. Maybe you got an idea, but that's it. You haven't thought about it at all. Well, first thing is find a community of people. Find a community of people that are passionate about the same things. If it's something that you're involved in, 3D printing or whatever, find that community. If your passion is innovation and being an innovator, being an inventor, then join the innovators community. Real simple. The innovators.community, spelled out. And join the community over there. It's 1,000 chief innovation officers from large organizations all the way down to lone innovators working out of their garage. And nobody is more important than anybody else, right? And everybody contributes and answers questions and gives feedback on ideas, and it's growing. We're trying to grow that community because we need to support each other, right? So find a community that you can be a part of, right? That's one way to figure out the next step, get that advice. The other is read and watch. Be willing to watch YouTube, listen to a podcast. You're listening to this podcast, you're watching this video. Thank you. That's one way to learn. Try and be willing to fail, right? Look, you got to be willing to fail, and you're going to learn from it. It took me 13 startups before I got my first IPO, where I really had my first big success. So the key question I'm going to direct you here to right now is, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? And that is, what are you going to do next? So don't wait. Go out there. Get started. So thanks for joining today. Hope you found this useful in your creative journey. Text the word innovation to 44222. And that'll keep you updated on everything going on here. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.